Welcome to Worth Quoting, a speaker series sponsored by the Women's Center at Florida Junior College. Our program today is going to be on consumer issues, and with us is the foremost expert in consumer affairs issues, Virginia Knauer, the Special Advisor to the President for Consumer Affairs and Director of United States Office of Consumer Affairs. Also with me is Emily Lisska, who is our own Consumer Affairs Consultant in Jacksonville. Welcome to you both. I'd like to start with you, Virginia, and Emily and I will both be asking you questions about consumer issues. We'd like to start with your involvement. How in the world did you get to be the Special Advisor to the President of the United States?
Well, it was a long road. I was trained here and abroad as a portrait painter, but I married an attorney who was interested in politics and had run for several offices. And I gradually became involved in his campaigns and then larger campaigns. But what annoyed me very much was the fact that women in the 1950s were not really part of the organization. Men tended to run the political scene in both parties. And I organized women's groups. We had training sessions, and they began to work on registration, and we sort of consolidated our position within my party, which happens to be the Republican Party. And suddenly they asked me to be vice chairman of the party in Philadelphia. And we had a wonderful group of women who were trained, they were articulate, and gradually they had much more to say because I pushed them forward to make sure that they were. And finally, when we out-registered men back in early 1959, I said, the time has come, you must have a woman on the ticket. They had never had a woman on the ticket in either party. And that was the year the Democratic Party decided they were going to have a woman. And I was fussing, and they had to have a woman, and I suggested various prominent young attorneys, women, that I thought would make a wonderful job as a city councilman at large. And finally, when the chips were down, they told me I was the candidate, and I was running things. I didn't want to be a candidate, but they said, all right, it's you or no one. And I thought, I will make the great sacrifice. So I ran, and strangely, in a city that was certainly, we were the minority party. I was elected, and it was a very close vote. They did a recount, of course, which annoyed me terribly. But I achieved the job, and I served 2 terms in city council.
Did you have to run against the other woman, or was it?
No,
okay.
no, fortunately.
Yes.
I didn't have to, and she and I were very good friends. But at the end of the 2 4-year periods, the governor of Pennsylvania asked me to head up his Consumer Protection Bureau. This was in 1968. And I said to him, I said, Ray, you're what? And he said, it's a Consumer Protection Bureau. And I said, is this brand new? He said, brand new. And I said, well, you have a lot of lawyers. Shouldn't they be heading it? He said, I have lawyers coming out of my ears. I want someone who will go out and tell the people they have this new service in Pennsylvania. So anyway, I took it over. It was a new challenge. And I suddenly realized that I had been doing consumer affairs as a councilman. Everyone brought their problems to their local or at-large councilman, and we had been solving problems at the local level. And many of them we had to be referred to congressmen or to senators when they embraced the federal scene. But I had a lot of fun. We got all our little FTC Act and our house door-to-door selling and rescission of contracts, all the basic consumer laws passed in Pennsylvania.
That was quite rare, though. Weren't you
Yes.
one of the very few consumer?
Yes, there were only 16, and I happened to be the only woman heading a state bureau. And we worked well with the press because the consumer reporters were just starting then, and we fed them a lot of case histories so that they in turn would warn other parts of the state about fraud sweeping in from the West. So we had a very active time, and then they asked me to come to Washington to meet some of the new administration, and I had friends. So in what turned out to be an interview, I was offered the old Betty Furness job, and I said, well, I didn't think you were going to fill it. And they said, well, we've decided to. And I said, is this just a committee where I meet once a month, figuring I wanted to stay in Pennsylvania? And they said, no, this is a full-time job. I'll never forget, they said, take all the time you want, talk to the governor to be released, and your family, that sort of thing. But call us at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Take all the time.
And I was sort of aghast. What can I do overnight? But the governor was very supportive. He said, you'll do more for us down there, talking about Pennsylvania laws and what we've done. We've been leaders. So I took the job, and it was a very beautiful ceremony. President and Mrs. Nixon were there, and my whole family, and the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, who was my titular boss at that time, joined in a Rose Garden ceremony to swear in. It's never been as formal since, I assure you. But it was wonderful. I had great support from the president. We established the Consumer Information Center, which that's the one that sends all those wonderful publications out from Pueblo. We work closely with them on a continuing basis. And then, of course, President Ford came on, and he asked all the women appointees to stay on. There were no changes, and we continued various consumer programs that were so helpful. So then, when Mr. Carter was elected, of course, I was a political appointee. I resigned and formed my own consulting firm. And that can be a lot of fun, can't it?
Oh, I think.
Yeah. And then I was active in the Reagan-Bush campaign the first time around, and was asked to serve on the transition team because I was determined to save my old programs, to keep them in place.
It sounds
which
like
I
the
did.
Consumer Affairs Office is your baby from beginning to end almost.
Well, I've been there 12 years. This is the 13th year in 3 administrations. But I must say, all my bosses, the 3 presidents, have been most supportive. And we, I think, have done exciting things. In this administration, we have started this National Consumers Week to stress the need and the value of consumer education. And it's become a national celebration with schools and colleges and governors and mayors and business and everyone getting into the act. And that's coming up the 22nd of April, so we'll have our
That's great.
4th one. So we're pleased about that too.
I think Emily's done a lot of research about Jacksonville issues, and you may want to just talk about some of the things that are nationwide impact and also that apply to Jacksonville.
Can I say so goes Jacksonville, so goes the nation,
Sure.
or is that a little heady? I don't know. I do think some of the issues are similar, and I just have to say, it must have been not long after you began working for the administration, first time around, your first job in Washington as consumer advisor, you came to Jacksonville.
Yes, I did. It's
And
about 11 or 12 years ago.
wonderful, wonderful talk. And I had just taken my first job in the consumer field in Tallahassee, working for the State Consumer Affairs Office. Got in my car one evening and drove over here as fast as I could after work to hear you speak. And it was really wonderful. Got in the car and drove back. And so that is just how much I have always admired you. And I wanted to say that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And well worth it, and still has been. And I know that we have dabbled in some of the same issues, but you on a much bigger and broader scale. And I have been very pleased to see some of the things that have been done for women as consumers. And I really would like you to address that, because I know so much of our audience, people who will be listening to the show, are women.
Well, I think one of the first things President Reagan did was to address the inequality of the tax situation. They called it the marriage penalty tax, where 2 working spouses paid more in income taxes than 2 individual people.
I remember
and that's
that well.
been, remember that? That
Oh, yes.
has been taken care of. Then another one that so many family businesses and family farms had to be sold to meet the inheritance taxes. And now that is approaching like $600,000 with no tax that can be transferred between spouses. I think this is wonderful. It saving farms, family businesses, and after all, that woman, that wife of many years, has contributed to the formation of whatever it is, and she should be allowed to enjoy that. I think these are things. And then we have another great problem, and that is the runaway spouse, in most cases husbands who just abandon their family. The court orders support payment. They say 80% of the women don't get the full amount, and some, maybe half, don't get any. And in this administration we have a new act that allows the I don't like to say confiscation, but taking that money due out of the errant spouse's paycheck.
It's like a garnishment of...
Yes, exactly, although we don't use the word garnishment. And also a very nice thing when so many of us overpay our income taxes and get a return from IRS. That can be taken too. So money can be taken out of that to give to the spouse who's been deserted and the support payments in delinquency. But there's now this network. And I think these are major things for women. And of course, the child care credits are almost doubled. And we think this is helpful because half of our female population is working, and many with younger children where they are dependent upon it. Interestingly, in Washington, many young mothers are working in the federal government, and HHS and others have daycare centers right in the building. And it's cute to see these little ones being taken for walks either around the roof garden or around the thing, and their mothers are working, have lunch with them. And I'm happy to see more of this taking place.
As a woman, I was very pleased to hear about the Retirement Equity Act. I thought this was a major milestone because I think it has been proven that women spend most of their time in the workforce in those earlier years, and maybe you can explain that act.
Well, I'm not sure that I know it. I'm not a lawyer, but I'll take a stab at it anyway, that women are now allowed at an earlier age to contribute to pension funds to build up that equity, so that when they do go back into the employment field and make contributions, that there'll be that certain initial pension fund there for them.
You know, I was always amazed when I worked at Consumer Affairs, the number of calls I would receive from widows and from women who had just gone through divorces about their various and sundry credit problems. And typically I'll tell you what I heard, and I know you can react. Basically from widows, I always heard from people who had no idea that they had no credit rating. Here they were then living on a fixed income every month, and if their TV set needed replacing, they really couldn't replace it because they were not allowed to use a credit card to purchase a new one, even though they would have been good payers. They would have paid for that in a timely fashion. And then I had the situation with divorced women. They would call to say their credit rating was being ruined because their ex-husband was not taking care of bills that they had jointly signed for together, even though the court decreed that he should. And it was a rigmarole explaining all this, but would you like to react to any of that?
Well, I think things have vastly improved. I think a lot of women, especially our younger women, as they go into the market, seeking jobs and having jobs, are building up separate credit ratings. I think this is good. I think a woman shouldn't be, in the past, as they were, discriminated against. But I think young women are being much more aware of the opportunities for investment, as well as establishing a credit rating.
I still have to feel so sorry for the older women who, especially upon the death of a spouse, you are sitting there with so many things to do. And one more thing, even though the government has avenues for you to get this credit rating, it's so difficult to explain. Now what you must do is write these letters. Now what you must do is go down to your major credit bureau in town. And so I think possibly, I don't know, the message I always gave, and you can tell me if I was giving the right one, is simply you've got to get in there and establish credit in your own name early. This very day, if anybody were listening who thought they might not have credit in their very own name as opposed to their husband's, should do something about it now, because it's so easy to do it before the death.
Well, I want to add something too. I think too many women, certainly of my generation, and maybe the next one before your younger women came along, depended on the husband. He's paid the bills, he made the money, and if there's a sudden death particularly, they are at a loss. They don't know anything, and they've never had to do it. And I think I'm so happy to see younger couples sharing that responsibility and to be involved in these things, so that if there is a break either through death or divorce, that woman isn't left stranded with no knowledge of her own economic background and what to do.
One of the things that the Women's Center does here at Florida Junior College has a widows program and a divorce
Wonderful.
program. So
I
we're
had
doing
not
our own
heard of that.
consumer education here.
As a matter of fact, I always referred people to your program because you needed
Wonderful.
someone to help you out.
Because
And finances were one of the big items on the whole,
Yeah.
on the whole agenda.
Well, while the president is trying to reform the tax structure to make it simpler, we still have a way to go. That hasn't happened yet, and I think it's very important. I think your university is doing a wonderful job to do this. I think this is great, and I haven't heard of a widows program before. I think this is great.
Well, there is a network of women's programs, and some of them are affiliated with community colleges and some of them aren't. But I think it does sort of implement the kinds of things that you're talking about. In other words, we educate the people about the laws and about the changes that you've made and about the need for establishing your own credit and those kinds of trends that are going on. So we try and keep up with the legislation and the things that you're doing, and one of the ways we do that is by having people like yourself come and talk with us. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the issues that are really on the forefront at this point. I mean, you know, the really hot issues in consumer affairs. People think about the lemon law and things like that. Maybe you can give us an idea about the scope of what you're into.
Well, we're not involved in the lemon law because it's being enacted state by state. And I think 17 states now have put some form of a lemon law in.
Which is a used or a car.
Yes, yes. And if you buy a car and it fails to be a problem fails to be fixed in 4 or 5, whatever times over a period of years, you either get your money back or a new car. But the consumer has to keep a record. But our office is not involved in that directly because that is a state matter, and we sort of keep out of that, although, you know, we're supportive of efforts in that area. But we become very much interested in this problem of product counterfeiting. And most people shake their head and say, oh yes, jeans, Gucci bags you buy on the street corners or in flea markets, and no one is very much upset about it, figuring that if you buy something at 1/4 of its normal advertised price, you're not getting the original. And it's not life-threatening. Economic loss, yes, maybe, and substandard product. And I was not really interested in it till I had visitations by businesses and different groups coming in and said, do you realize that there are counterfeit pacemakers? There are counterfeit heart pumps used in open heart surgery. And they have been recalled. Can you imagine having your pacemaker recalled because it had a counterfeit microchip or something in it? And then the whole area of replacement parts of automobiles, brake drums that fail, oil filters that don't filter, gas caps that don't keep the gas in when your car rolls over. It becomes an inferno. Endless. And then, of course, you know, just before Christmas, one of our leading pharmaceutical companies, quite ethically, recalled all their birth control pills because they discovered counterfeit birth control pills in it. Now, they've sent me samples of the real and the counterfeit, and, you know, a casual look, you'd take more than a casual look, you'd have to use a microscope to see any difference. And, of course, they are non-effective. You can imagine the hoopla. One time, and a lot of this comes from the Far East, smuggled in, and also from certain countries in South America. Now, we have our own counterfeiters here. Up to now, it's been a civil offense. And it's only when it jumped from about $4 billion 4 years ago up to, in a short 4 years, up to 18 or $19 billion, I repeat that, $1 billion in the American market. Now, American consumers are going to, because they're unaware, have bought counterfeit goods, and some at risk. The customs people intercepted airplane bolts meant to hold on the wing assemblies. Can you imagine counterfeit bolts, low tensile strength, could snap? And they have found counterfeit parts in fire detection systems on airplanes. You're frowning. Exactly. So did I. I was horrified. So working with the private sector and with all the government agencies, and the customs people have a new setup called Tripwire, we did it. But still, it was hard to catch people, and the fine was so little that the counterfeiters, you know, just
pay it and keep on going.
Exactly. Cost of doing business, illegal business, but business. So the president signed this new law that jumps the fines to $250,000 first offense for an individual, counterfeiter, or anyone in the chain of distribution. That could be wholesalers, it could be retailers, or anyone buying from retail areas, in the chain of distribution, knowingly distributing this product, knowingly distributing. In other words, sales representatives who go out and get a so-called bargain and infiltrate that in the regular stock, and that's been discovered in a very prominent New York department store. Now the store can be assessed $1 million first offense that jumps to $15 million for repeated offenses, and that 5 years in jail for the first offense of an individual, and that goes up to 15 years. Now that is a tough law, gets your attention. And already one of the major automobile manufacturers tells me that the auto parts, the auto replacement parts, counterfeits seem to be slowing down. Now to help the public, they say, how can we tell? Many of our manufacturers, 3M and others, are dividing little stick-on things that can't so far be duplicated. Light signatures on the West Coast. Control Laser right here in Florida has a way of inscripting numbers on metal things. And these are to help the purchasers, but also visible ones to help consumers. The recording industry for years has been ripped off by counterfeiters, and they're using little things that have a fiber content that is absolutely can't be duplicated. But these are all steps. But with the crackdown on the law and more money in the budget for the customs people to enforce these things, we're going to put a dent in it.
I think so. What relationship do you have? You're talking about birth control pills and other kinds of relationships, I guess imports. What relationship do you have with other agencies in the government?
Very close ones with the Food and Drug Administration on regulation, Department of Agriculture with all the agricultural products that are under their control, the Federal Trade Commission with deceptive practices and that sort of thing, the legal thing, of course the Justice Department, but also the Consumer Product Safety Commission. I've testified on their new bill on toy safety, but we have a working relationship. I won't say it's daily, but certainly better than weekly, where our staffs work together on joint projects. But we also work with the private sector. There's a lot of help out there. We're reducing the federal budget, but we reach out to various companies who help us produce generic information. They pay for printing and that, and all they get is a little line. For instance, our great posters, the first ones were printed by Citicorp and then Safeway, and now Sears is doing it for 2 years. I couldn't afford the graphics, never mind 80,000 posters around the country announcing National Consumers Week. But they do it, and all they get is this minuscule line. You have to really get very close to look at it to find out what it says. But they're happy to do it. They feel they're doing something for the community, and it's just the association. So we have a lot of people lined up who are helping us. The American Council of Life Insurance for several years now has paid for the distribution of our consumer announcement, 400,000 of them. Now, we couldn't afford that, but all they get is a little line saying, you know, produced in cooperation with, and but they're happy to do it. And there are lots of private sector people out there who want to help. The International Anti-Counterfeiting coalition, made up of better than 300 of our major firms who have been ripped off by counterfeits, have worked closely. We put on a anti-counterfeiting exhibit in connection with the World's Fair, and they said they had almost 500,000 visitors. People say, oh, I didn't know they counterfeited this. Huh, didn't know they counterfeited that. But it was a learning process. Now, I don't regulate. Our U.S. Office of Consumer Affairs does not regulate, but we can raise the public's consciousness to the fact that there is a problem, and if they find a counterfeit, take it back to the store, or better still, alert, if they think it is, alert the federal attorneys or the FBI, who then will go to the store and trace that goods. The retailer may be perfectly innocent, but to trace it back through bills of sale to the person who put it into the system, and there we'll catch them with our new laws. But consumers have a responsibility, not just to say, I bought a counterfeit. But there are watches. 1 out of every 5 watches now on the market is a counterfeit. So buy carefully.
Yeah.
Buy carefully from established businesses, but even they can get caught by careless purchasing agents somewhere along the line. But this new law, I'm having a conference with the Council of Better Business Bureaus. I used to be one of their national directors, and we're having it in June. Our office and the Council of Better Business Bureaus just on this subject, to alert more people, to alert all their bureaus so that they can answer questions about counterfeiting, what to do, and or they themselves get all these complaints to pass them on. We think that we've made a beginning. We have strong support from the President. As I said, he signed the bill, supported it, and now it's up to educating the public that they too have a responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you find so often, though, the public is a little greedy? If it's not a product that can affect their safety, they may just be pleased to have it. But then when it comes to this safety issue that you brought in here today that's really alerted me, it's a different ballgame, and people
very different.
Open their eyes.
There's a whole area of gray, the gray market. Now, you know, like Seiko has recognized contractual agreements with different stores to sell Seiko watches. But some of the cut-rate people go to Japan and buy Seiko watches there out of the contractual arrangement, but they are real Seiko watches, and they offer them very much off the regular price, agreed upon price between the company and the official distributors. And one of the men in my office, when we were talking about this, suddenly said, well, I just paid $100 for this, and they were supposed to be $230. So he immediately gets on the phone and traces it, and that was an example of gray market. Now that is another area. It is not illegal under counterfeiting. They are the real thing. So that there's still bargains out there. We're not trying to take bargains away from consumers, but you have to look for the criminal element that are ruling our marketplace.
Well, I think we just have a couple of minutes. Maybe you could address something, and that is, I think you have proven that women can be very effective in key positions like this, and maybe you could give some advice to anybody who happens to be viewing today about the political life or the consumer advocacy life. Can you give any advice?
I think both of them are wonderful careers for young women. Men too, but particularly for women, because it gives them a chance to do something, accomplish something. And let's face it, we all hope to turn the picture around, to make things better for not only ourselves and our families, but for consumers generally. And working as volunteers, a lot of the state and local offices have volunteers. They need help answering the phones, helping to solve some of the local problems. Politics is great. I recommend young women to work in the party of their choice and to be informed, because if they're informed, they know the issues, they can speak on the issues, then they're respected. Let's face it, a lot of men still run political parties, but more and more women. We're very proud that President Nixon has appointed so many wonderful women to his cabinet.
Well,
they're doing good.
And President Reagan also.
Yes, absolutely. President Reagan has, and of course President Carter did too. This is good. These are women who are making a difference, and they are competent. That's
really contributing.
Elizabeth Dole in transportation, Margaret Heckler in HHS.
So many.
And of course Jean Kirkpatrick, who just is leaving now the United Nations. That's a hard stint. I don't blame anyone not wanting to do it.
Well, I think you have to add your name to the list, Virginia, because you have been so effective and done so much for the country, and we'll look forward to having more contributions from your agency and yourself. Emily, I'd like to thank you for being with us and asking so many pertinent questions about the topic. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you. It's been fun, too. I've had a lot of fun.